RTHK Radio 3.
You're listening to Brunch with me, Noreen Mir, on this Thursday morning. Now, we're diving into a topic that resonates with many of us, building and maintaining healthy relationships. Now, we all know that navigating the complexities of romance can be quite tricky, and also understanding the foundations of a strong connection is really key. So how can we do this? In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm really delighted to be joined once again by clinical psychologist Quratulain Zaidi, who's here to share with us some valuable insights and practical tips to enhance your relationships and to hopefully foster deeper connections. Welcome back on the program, Dr. Zaidi. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Noreen. Good to see you.
Yes, we are live this morning on Facebook, Noreen Mir on RTHK Radio 3, and perhaps our listeners have their own insights and maybe your own comments and maybe your own tricks and tips that you'd like to share with us. Feel free to do so there. So let's dive right in. What are sort of the biggest misconceptions? Before we talk about misconceptions, let's talk about maybe the important aspects of a healthy relationship or maybe a marriage.
So, what I have seen or what I've learned over the years is that there are just some fundamentals that help create a healthy relationship, which is obviously your commitment to the person, the honesty within the relationship, mutual respect that you have for each other as people, because that helps foster growth and maintains a semblance of healthy, long-term relationship, as well as some form of care that you have for each other. And that goes from the biological, biochemical chemistry that you have right at the beginning to, how you navigate it through ups and downs of parenthood, and then moving forward as you grow older, as well as having, complete transparency and some form of friendship. You have to have some form of friendship to be able to foster a healthy relationship, long-term relationship. So those are the ingredients that make up a good relationship.
Dr. Zaidi, I'm so glad you mentioned transparency rather than just honesty. And for some of our listeners who may think they may be a similar thing, I watched a clip recently that really helped me break down sort of the difference. Being honest is saying, oh, well, where are you going out for dinner? Say the wife is asking the husband, where are you going for dinner? And then the husband might say, I'm going out, with some colleagues. And then the wife might say, well, what time will you be back? And then the husband might say, oh, about 11. That's honesty. I mean, he's telling her, things that she needs to know. Yeah. But transparency would be something like, hey, babe, the man may be saying to the wife, hey, babe, I'm going out for drinks with my colleagues at about 7, so after dinner. I'll probably be back at about 11 or before midnight. Don't wait up for me. I think that sort of, it's a simple line, but it's sort of, the onus is on the person going out rather than the person who's seeking out the information. I think
100%. 100%. That's exactly what it is, that you are just being transparent as to what is happening in the day for you. Agreed. And you're communicating that.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I often see communication as sort of the key of a healthy relationship. Yet I find that communication is such a arbitrary. Everybody communicates in a different manner, and what's good communication to you may be different for another couple. But essentially, what makes a good communicator, or what are the sort of things that? How does communication contribute to a healthy relationship?
So over the
years of the people that you've seen,
right. It's from my perspective, I think I've narrowed it down to communication is what the other person heard.
Wow.
Does that make sense? I mean, it's like, it's not what you're saying, it's what they're hearing. And if you're saying the sky is blue and they're hearing it's gray, then you need to change the way you're describing the sky.
Yes.
You need to be able to say it's blue. So that's the fundamental. I mean, if you really broke it down to simplifying it, communication is what the other person heard. And if they haven't heard what you wanted them to say, then you need to clarify it a little bit better and be able to communicate in a way that what you're trying to say gets. accepted or heard, or it reaches what you want, what is that's being communicated. So I
Yeah.
think I know it's a very simple way of saying it, but that's what it is.
No,
I feel.
no, that is fantastic. I feel like we need a T-shirt made, and that's not. It's also applicable not just to a romantic relationship, but for management also. Communication is what the other person heard. I started by asking sort of the misconceptions of what sorts of misconceptions do people have about love and long-term relationships, and what it might look like to what they think it should look like.
So, I was thinking about some of this, and I was like, at 26, I think, or 25, when I got married. Before I got married, it was very much like, okay, once you get married, once you get to being married or being in the long-term relationship, then everything's going to be okay. Little did I know,
It's
little did
just the
I know,
beginning.
that's the beginning, right? So I think it is whatever it is that you're thinking, only if I get to this, then what we forget is like any other relationship, this one requires time and effort and investment, and that's I think what gets missed a lot, especially when you're focused on one part of it, that if we have children, or if we when we move to this, or when I have that job, then I will have more time because it will be less stressful. No, it is just that it is consistent effort that you have to put in, and I think that probably is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have. But what are your thoughts on that?
I'm nodding for our radio listeners. I'm nodding profusely because it's true. We spend all this time sort of, well, sometime pursuing the partner that we ultimately choose to marry or to be with long term. But then life gets in the way. Perhaps we're staying later in the office. Perhaps our listeners can resonate with this. Maybe you're traveling a little bit more for business trips. Maybe your attention is at your work. Maybe your attention is to do something else, to pursue a certain hobby, and less time is given to your partner. And there's a mismatch because you spend all this time pursuing your partner, wanting to be with that person. Now, I'm not saying you've got to be with them all the time and you've got to have your own separate identity and separate hobbies. But sometimes if you're not investing that time and effort, then the crack starts to show. And I would assert that many times people separate is because they're not coming together in terms of really investing time and effort with each other. But of course, people change, and I think fundamentally people, maybe the values change throughout their marriage, or maybe they seek a different sort of lifestyles. Have you seen that, Dr. Zaidi, where people, I'm sure, yes, that's why you're in practice for couples therapy, and that is, people sort of over time feel like their values have changed over time, or maybe their styles of parenting have led them down a different path. What do you see?
Look, as we grow together, and if you are invested in spending the time and making the effort in the relationship, people tend to grow together. However, if there are differences, or if people are kind of growing apart and they are growing, going through different stages in their life, then the values do change over time. And it's not that they change over time. Maybe they were already, part of that was already there, and you begin to notice it more with time, is my experience of it. Because one of the things is that when we first get together, we tend to overlook, right, things that you maybe are niggling, or you feel like that's not going to work, or that wasn't right. And then the main thing that people focus on is that they will change. Something will change about this person, right? That I know I don't like it right now, but they will change. Once we get married, once we are together, once we are moving forward, once we move to this country together, the person will change. It's actually not the case, because their fundamental values stay the same. And do they change with time? Of course they do. If we are, or there is some flexibility within that, but you ignoring that is probably part of where people are now at different stages. They've been living, separate lives. And in Hong Kong, honestly, where people travel a lot, I know over COVID that was different, but where people start to live their separate lives, then it's difficult for them to come back together. And I think we mentioned that previously as well in one of our chats, that children leave home and suddenly now you realize that you two have been living your life so separately, that how do we bridge that gap again? So I think it is that consistent investment in the relationship that keeps that, and you're then checking in if your values have changed, right? You're keeping an updated map of your partner's internal world, that you're able to then know that, oh, there's this change happening. Because if you're not checking in, then you don't know, and that change has already happened. Does that,
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense?
Absolutely. And also, one point you made really early on is the care for each other. If something bothers your partner, you may think it's a small thing, but then if it bothers them, you feel sort of you'd want to know why it's bothering them. And if it's something that you can sort of alter or change, you try and find a way, or at least to find out the reason why it's bothering that person so much, rather than sweeping it under the rug and thinking, oh, well, he or she will get over it. And it does happen. And I think it's that building up of he or she will get over it. And actually, they don't get over it. It just builds up to resentment. What about, having ups and downs in relationships is natural, and maybe shouldn't use the word normal, but typical, of any relationships, friendships, at home or romantic relationships. How can couples handle those ups and downs without sort of falling apart ultimately?
So here's some news that you might find interesting. That conflict, we know, is natural in relationships, and it's a functional positive aspect, because through the conflicts we're able to learn more about ourselves and our partners, right? And it does lead to greater intimacy, better friendships as well. So when people who've been married in a good health, or been in a long-term relationship for a period of time, what they've been doing is that the way they bring up a complaint is slightly different. Rather than the blame, it is about, I feel like, or I feel underappreciated when I come home and the dishes aren't washed. And it would be really, really helpful if you were able to take that into account rather than just ignoring it, right? So that's one of them. And so it's and the preemptive repair from the partner would be, I'm so sorry, right? I know, and I'll try and do better. That's the ideal kind of conversation. So it's something that's bothering you, you bring it up, and your partner acknowledges it, and you move forward. It is, but the 30% of the couple's problems are solvable. 70% of the couple's issues that come up are perpetual, and they don't get resolved over time. So within the couple's work, it's managing the conflict. It's not conflict resolution. We never use the word conflict resolution. So because there are some things that are just not resolvable, and why is that this number? And this number comes from research based on Gottman's work. So the people who are able to, these 70% of perpetual issues are, things that come from how you grew up, your own identity, your own value system. You two are different, and you're going to have differences in that. So one person is going to have one point of view, the other person is going to have another point of view, and both of those point of views are okay. These perpetual issues become stuck when he says I'm right and she says I'm right, and both of them are saying that if you love me, you have to agree with me, and if you love me, you have to agree with me. What helps in this 70% is that I understand where you're coming from, I understand where you're coming from, and then being able to move forward with that. Because underneath this position, there's always a story. There's always something that is very important about those set of dishes that, that keeps it going, for example. So I think it is about being able to manage the conflict and be able to talk about it with humor, deflect it, and really understand why, as you said earlier, what is important about this particular thing that bothers your partner. What is it about? Spending money is one of them. Usually, finances is one thing that comes up, and the other one is parenting. And again, when you were growing up, what did finances mean in your home? And what did it mean in your home? Because people can have two different ways of looking at it, right? So for one partner, finances is a sense of security. For the other one is, we have it. Why are we not able to enjoy it? Because it isn't linked to a sense of security, as an example as well. So yeah, it is. It's just being able to not avoiding the conflict, because people who sometimes come in 20 years of marriage, we've never argued. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
I've heard that, and then they say that's a secret of a happy marriage. And I think, wow, one of you's got very good tolerance of not saying anything, because 20, 30 years.
Exactly. And that's the person who's built up the resentment and doesn't feel heard, and is feels invisible in the relationship. Certainly in my experience, that's what it has been. So when they come in and we've never argued, that is a big telling sign that there has been a lot of avoidance from both of them.
Yeah. Wow. I like that a lot. And it's also not how you argue. I mean, it's not what you argue about, it's how you argue about it. Because if you're using kind words, or if you're not name calling or not being disrespectful, then it doesn't damage and hurt the relationship as it would if you are sort of going off the rails a little bit. What about this notion of couples having their own individual lives and interests? How does that sort of factor in a healthy and happy relationship?
It is so important to maintain your individual identity. Just imagine that everything was dependent on your partner. And actually, there is a lot of pressure on partners in this day and age, because they are your best friend. They are also your mentor. They are the person that you go to. They are your lover. They are also the person that is keeping a sense of security and stability. And they're also the partner that you're bringing your children up with. So there's a lot of pressure in the relationship on that partnership. So you need to be able to have your own identity, your own individual self, to be able to, provide all of this that's expected of you in the relationship. Because if you have, things that you're doing for yourself, it's the same thing as or very similar to the concept of that your work provides an identity, as well as being a mother provides an identity, being a mentor provides an identity, and all these different roles, and they're fulfilling. It's a sense of purpose, because you can't just rely on this one person and this one thing, because it's not healthy in any shape or form.
And it's good to have your own hobbies and interests. So all those years ago, when my husband bought me a fishing rod, and in hopes to think that I will enjoy fishing, I've done it once with him, and we've maintained separate interests, which the marriage is still going well. So I'm happy to report that. Finally, it's important to foster connection. So what are some practical ways that couples can not resolve conflicts, can manage their conflicts without damaging their relationships? And what are some practical tips that you have, Dr. Zaidi?
So one of them, as I said, is how you bring that complaint, because underneath each complaint there is you're making a request for connection. There is something that you need from your partner, and instead of blaming them for not having it, just request it. It is bringing it as a request, or expressing your need in a way that's received rather than blamed. So that's number one. Number two, making sure that you are spending, you're doing small things often with each other, for each other, so that there is enough money in your emotional bank account of your relationship that it keeps going. So when you do lose it sometimes, then you've got enough credit in there to be able to see that through.
It's not an empty tank. Yes, exactly.
It's not empty, and you're not running in debt So
Yes.
that's what's helpful. So doing small things often, right? And just making sure that you're checking in regularly with each other to keep that map updated of your partner's internal world.
Yeah.
So those are some basic things, but we do forget, and that's what maintains a good, healthy, platform for the relationship.
There's still so much we haven't talked about. This is such a great topic, Dr. Zaidi. We haven't talked about intimacy and all those date night things, fun things to do when you've been together for a long time. Definitely a topic that we should revisit another time. Meanwhile, thank you so much, Dr. Quratulain Zaidi, for your sharing today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.